everyone. My name is Erin Smith, and I write a website called the Gluten-Free Globetrotter. Today, I'm here to talk about some family-friendly destinations around the globe. So I'll just give you a brief introduction, and then we'll dive right in. I like to show this slide first. So I was actually diagnosed in 1981 with celiac disease, and I show this picture because this is the summer I was diagnosed. And I especially like to show this to parents that are very worried their kids are newly diagnosed. I've never been on a vacation that wasn't totally gluten-free. So I have celiac, my sister now has it, we have cousins that have it, and I've been around the whole world. I know Kim has more countries than me, but I've been to 21 countries. I've been to 33 states, and it's always been gluten-free. I have two websites, Gluten-Free Fun, which I started in 2007, and Gluten-Free Globetrotter, which I started actually from Prague, because at the time, there was a gluten-free restaurant in Prague. It's since closed down, but I had my first gluten-free beer on tap, and it was like life-changing. So I wanted people to know about this place. So that's really, my passion is travel. It always has been. So I started my website for that reason. And I led the New York City Celiac Meetup group for 10 years. Last year I moved to California, so I started a support group in Santa Cruz, California. The top question I get is, where should I go? And in the US, I recommend big cities. New York and Chicago have research centers, so there are a lot of celiac advocates. I'm very partial to New York. I lived there my whole life until last year. And I just recently updated on my website list of dedicated gluten-free places in New York City, and now there's over 30. So this includes bakeries, takeout, sit-down restaurants, there's a gluten-free store. So New York is really a great place for gluten-free in a condensed place. So Chicago as well, there's a research institute there at U Chicago, so there's a lot of awareness. And then San Francisco, I now live about 70 miles south of San Francisco, so I'm starting to explore San Francisco more, but there are a lot of options because food is really important in San Francisco, and as in every city. And then for smaller cities, I recommend Portland and Austin. I don't know if anybody's been to Portland, Oregon. I actually think in the country, it's the best city to be gluten-free. There's so many options. I worked there for 4 years. And I never went hungry in Portland. But also there's a strong foodie culture in Portland and Austin. They have food trucks, they have food carts, they have food festivals, and it's not just a gluten-free food festival. It's a food festival that you can go with anyone who's eating, but there are now a lot of gluten-free options. And then Disney. We'll get into Disney a little deeper. I know I've spoken to a few parents. Disney is high on their list. So these are my recommendations for the U.S. I've also heard that Asheville in North Carolina is apparently great. I haven't been there yet, but it's on my list. And there are a lot of options there. So international, a big question I get is, where should I go? I tell people that are a little bit nervous, I say, try Canada. They speak the language. There's a very big Canadian Celiac Association. They have new, stricter labeling initiatives going on, and it's not that far. So Canada, I would recommend first. And then, as Karen said, and I'm sure that Kim will say, in Europe, Italy was fantastic. And you would never think in the land of pizza and pasta. But I actually remember having happy tears because I was sitting outside of the Vatican eating pasta, drinking wine, and I just couldn't believe that was happening. But Italy is fantastic. You can actually buy gluten-free food in the pharmacy in Italy. So people don't realize that, but in Italy, it's your medicine is food, and so you can buy food there. And then in the UK, there's a lot of awareness. There are also big supermarket chains, Marks and Spencer's and Tesco, which have free-from food, which is the UK version of gluten-free. But in these places, especially Marks and Spencer's, you can actually get prepared food that's gluten-free. And so if you're ever flying through Heathrow, there's actually a Marks Marks and Spencer's down in one of the main concourse levels, and you could buy sandwiches there. So if you're connecting to go somewhere else, I was going to Wales and taking a bus, so I loaded up on food at Marks and Spencer's, which is a supermarket. But that's one of the things I do when I travel. I go to supermarkets, which is kind of weird, but I get excited about finding new food. And then Finland is actually, there was just an article in in Allergic Living magazine all about Finland, and they're calling it the celiac capital of the world right now. So now all of a sudden Finland's high on my travel list. So I haven't personally been to Finland yet, but I will make it one day. And then Central and South America, I like to recommend. People, are a little bit nervous, but these are countries, just examples of countries that don't have a wheat-heavy diet. So Costa Rica, Brazil, Argentina, there are a lot of options. In Argentina, there's a big national celiac organization. There are also gluten-free magazines in Argentina. One is called Aglutinados. And so these are like, your gluten-free living magazine, but it's in Spanish. It's you can find English translations online. They make recommendations of where to eat across the country. Also, there is, Argentina is way ahead of the US in terms of labeling, and every month the national organization puts out a list of packaged goods that are labeled gluten-free because it's part of their labeling law. So you can actually download this list of popular packaged goods and know what you can eat in Argentina. And then Australia and New Zealand, now I haven't personally been, and maybe Kim will talk about this, but they have always had really very strict labeling. It was, at one point, it was 3 parts per million, whereas in the US it's 20 parts per million. So there's a lot of awareness there, like I said, strict labeling, and that is very high on my list. For some reason, now that I live in California, I feel like Australia is closer to me, which it's not. So, so hopefully one day I will go to Australia. And then, as Karen said, a cruise. So I went on a cruise to Honduras, Guatemala, and a lot of other countries in the Western Caribbean, but I only ate one meal off the ship because the food was so good on the boat. If I did an excursion, they gave me packaged, a packaged lunch, and the cruise was an awesome option. So we're going to talk really briefly about hotels. So I give 3 examples here: Fairmont, Hotel Survey Group, and Iberostar, which actually now do training at the corporate level for how to prepare gluten-free meals. So I know Fairmont is worldwide, and the other 2, I think Iberostar is both in Europe and the Caribbean. I know they have options in like Cancun, but they do training, and then hopefully they're training down at the resort level. But I know that Fairmont, I think all of them. I'm also starting to see residence inns, depending where you are. I was in one in New Hampshire, and they actually had a separate cabinet and a separate toaster oven. So it's trickling down. It's a little slow. It's much better than it used to be, but these options are out there. And then boutique hotels. I put Arenas Del Mar because I personally been there. The owner's daughter has celiac, so he brought in Great Kitchens, which is part of now called Beyond Celiac. It was the National Foundation for Celiac Awareness. So they brought in staff and trained their entire staff. So you can sit on the beach in Costa Rica and eat like a gluten-free queen, which is what I did. And then this hotel in Italy is totally gluten-free as well. The owner has celiac. So I have a friend who went last year, and every meal was 100% gluten-free. There's no gluten there. And the same with these Airbnbs. And Fairview Austin is a great old southern building, and the owner's whole family actually eats paleo, and they don't have any gluten in their kitchen, but they don't advertise it. So they didn't want to turn people off. Some people think gluten-free tastes bad, so they didn't really advertise it, but it was awesome. The whole breakfast spread was gluten-free. And then Inn on Randolph, I haven't been to yet, but they are like this award-winning Napa-based B&B, and the owner has Lyme disease. So she decided to make her whole kitchen gluten-free, and nobody knows the difference. And they continue to be the top B&B in Napa. So these exist. As Karen said, you have to do some research, but these do exist now. And actually, we have Melissa from a B&B in Delaware, and it's totally gluten-free as well. So, these are out there. Sorry, you're not on. I didn't know you would be here.
That's all right.
And then I asked my readers, where do they recommend? I don't have my family yet. I just got married. So, but beaches, Atlantis. I know Atlantis has a questionnaire if you're going there, and you can fill out what your food preferences or your dietary restrictions. Great Wolf Lodge. I don't know if anybody's been there, but these are very family-friendly indoor water theme parks. And I think there's 20 across the whole country right now, but the two closest to here, Williamsburg and the Poconos, have gluten-free options. Family camp, and I know I was speaking to some parents earlier, family camps are sleepaway camps that have family weekends. So there's one going on this weekend at the New Jersey Y camp. Everything is totally gluten-free for the whole weekend. It's a 3-day weekend, I believe, or 2-day weekend. And you don't have to worry. And then the other thing for people that don't want to travel, a little nervous, I say staycation, but try a new restaurant. Try someplace you've never been before. Kind of get comfortable with eating outside of your home before you go to Italy or go to wherever you're going. And then, as Karen said, vacation rentals. I put this at the bottom because a lot of people don't want to cook on their vacation. But I've stayed in Airbnbs in Paris and most recently on a trip back to New York. And it's great because then you have your own kitchen. And I'll give you some tips on that later, but that is an option. And then who to talk to. Every place has a very different title. When I was on my cruise, it was the Captain de Cuisine. But I think, as Karen also said, you need to speak up. You want to start the conversation before you leave, but also when you're there, because the worst thing is getting gluten on your vacation. And I have to say, knock on wood, the most I've ever gotten gluten has been at home or at a local restaurant, and really overseas I've been very lucky because I'm hyper vigilant when I travel. So these are just examples. They have different titles everywhere. I want to talk about Disney. I have to admit, I haven't been to Walt Disney World since I was 12, and I did walk through downtown Disney in Anaheim last year, but I was going to a conference, so I didn't have time to stop. But Disney actually now offers allergen-friendly menus in many of their restaurants, and they also have cast members, which are their staff, that they train specifically to talk about dietary restrictions. So I've heard excellent things about Disney. I don't know if you know, but there's a Hawaii Disney, which is a Looney Resort, and same thing, gluten-free in all the restaurants in Disney. And then specific websites that are just about Disney and allergies, and also this app, the Gluten-Free for Disney Dining. It's just about restaurants in Disney. It's available on iTunes. I'd like to talk about travel-friendly food. I mean, everybody here probably carries something in their bag at all times. Fruit, vegetables, chips, bars. But I think one thing that's often overlooked is protein, and people forget about protein when they're traveling, and there's only so many bars you can eat on a 12-hour flight. So I do recommend protein. I will say I call these my smelly snacks, because if you are a family of 5 eating hard-boiled eggs on the plane, people might not like you very much. But you need protein, right? And so I went to Thailand a few years ago, and I brought those tuna pouches with me. Bumblebee makes them, and they were actually really helpful to have, because then you're not just eating bars. And then now there's a lot of gluten-free jerky that's available that's high in protein, also high in sodium, so be careful. And then these ready-made quinoa cups, I don't know if you've seen them, but you can actually find them now in places like Trader Joe's not Trader Joe's, TJ Maxx or Marshall's, like in the food section. And these are cups that have pre-made quinoa that you can either microwave or you just add a little hot water to rehydrate, and that's a high protein snack. So just some quick travel tips. One thing I always do is, if your hotel can offer you a microwave or a fridge, then that way you have a place to store your food. I used to take medication that required refrigeration, so not for celiac, it was for my asthma. I had a nebulizer, and I needed to always have a fridge, but then it was great because I could always keep my food in there as well. So now, most hotels have a little mini fridge, but you can ask for one because they do have them. Toaster bags, I don't know if anybody has used these, but I recommend buying these. You can buy them on Amazon. These are little bags that you can put bread in to put in a shared toaster. So they're reusable. You can actually even make like a grilled cheese sandwich in there. And it just will keep a barrier between the regular toaster and your gluten-free bread. You want to avoid contamination. Using your coffee pot. Coffee pots can't find all the time now because the K-cups are around. But if you have a coffee pot in your hotel room, you could use that to make some like hot cereal, gluten-free oatmeal, any kind of gluten-free cereal. I had a reader once tell me they used it to boil hot dogs, which to me, like coffee-flavored hot dogs, but it worked for them. So you can get creative if you only have a coffee pot. And then keeping your food cold. I get this question all the time. I actually use frozen grapes because then you could eat the grapes. So if you have a little ice pack, I've often had to throw away my ice pack at security. They're not quite sure what the gel is, so they make me toss it. So you can freeze berries or grapes and then eat them. And then on your trip home as well, you can go to the supermarket and buy some fruit. I would say if you're traveling internationally, be careful what you bring back in. They will confiscate. Even coming from Canada, they took my fruit. So, it's just the laws of the countries. Ziploc bags, I think everybody probably uses those to store stuff anyway. And then one thing I recommend, especially if you're going away for a long period of time, or if you're going to like a beach house or something, ship your food ahead. When I went to Texas, I knew I was going to be traveling for a couple of days, and so there was a box at my hotel that I had shipped ahead. So this is, I think it's especially helpful if you are going camping or you're going to an Airbnb, but then you don't have to pack everything and it's there waiting for you. And then, as Karen said, and kind of going into the topic of Airbnb or a vacation rental, I would recommend getting a lunchbox just for your gluten-free person, but putting utensils and camping dishware. These are, smaller dishes that you can use, but they're dedicated then. They're your gluten-free dishes. Because when you're there, you don't know who has been using the utensils before you. You can also get a cutting board that you can roll up and just kind of put that in your bag. And then I found these really cool collapsible pots on Amazon that are used for camping. And that way, if you want to boil spaghetti and you don't know kind of if the pots and pans are clean, so you can use those. And also aluminum foil. You'd be surprised of how many things you can cook aluminum with, put it on the grill, put it in the oven, put it wherever you need, and kind of keep your food safe. So those are my top tips. I'm here all day. We're short on time. So, and you could also find me online on Instagram. Thank you.